Now it's time to go to private sector. And Stefan rightly mentioned that Walton probably doesn't want a second Walton, but Bangladesh wants it, right? But here we have a CEO who actually went out of his way and told in media that Bangladesh can have 4 or 5 Unilevers. And so I'm inviting the CEO of Unilever, Mr. Zaved Akhtar, and my question to him would be, a lot of the learning for domestic firms happens through MNCs. And Stefan and Mushtaq both mentioned the need to be open for learning. How do you see Bangladeshi local firms learning from MNC? Also, you are in a position to also give us an assessment of the skills and capacity gap you see of the workers here. So how do you see that? And also, what are the upgrading opportunities and challenges you see? Thank you.
Thank you. It's too presumptuous for me to give such a detailed input on all of this, but I'll give you some perspective. I think one of the things that both the professors mentioned, and in many cases, FDI gets misconstrued as only financial investment that comes in the country. That's actually the least amount, because you could anyway get that in different ways. One of the things that brings in is actually technology, capability, managerial assessment, and that's why you have seen historically, and even if I look at FMCG industry of this country, and I've been in this industry with half of its history, has been dominated by mostly MNCs as well. And the reason for it is actually how do you really leverage many of these know-how and apply it. And Professor Mushtaq talked about it, that how do you really build an efficient supply chain. The reality is one of the competitive advantages that we tend to speak is low cost of labor. It's actually a competitive disadvantage, because we actually have one of the highest unproductive labor. So in fact, the best way to do it is you need to leverage the low-cost labor with technology, because when you're able to build them together, you will be able to unleash the opportunities significantly. So in that way, you can actually run a much more efficient supply chain. And one of the important elements of running many of these elements is, and you talked about competitors as well, it's not that the market doesn't have opportunity. This market has huge opportunity. That comment of mine was just a comparison on per capita FMCG consumption of this country, which is roughly around $23. Just for comparison, this is $44 a year for India. Now we boast about higher per capita GDP, but our per capita FMCG is almost half. Or let's say if you take in Indonesia, it's actually $100. It just talks about the opportunity that this market has. Now this opportunity needs to be leveraged from that context, because the more you actually have much larger amount of competitors, larger amount of industry players, the more opportunity comes. So let me tell you the value addition that has happened. So in the 90s, we used to import our packaging material. So 95% of our products are locally made, but we used to import packaging materials. We've localized all of them. There's a huge industry that gets in. Now the next big addition that you do is how do you really localized raw material. So today there are a huge amount of raw material that we use, from palm oil to soda ash to lapsa. Do you know that Bangladesh actually is now in a space where we could actually set up a soda ash factory? Not for FMCG, because soda ash is also used by the ready-made garments industry. Huge amount of soda ash actually gets up. So if you actually start looking at it, don't look at it from a perspective of the industry that you're operating in, because the question is it gets used across industry. And if you really set up those capabilities, it will only make me far more competitive. Now, one of the things that I'm trying to do now is, Bangladesh, how do I really get my products to be exported? Unfortunately, we have the third largest factory, by the way, in Bangladesh, in South Asia. We're not the third largest in cost competitiveness because of many reasons. And the only way we can actually acquire and get that thing done is how do you really facilitate the whole supply chain to be much more leaner, much more efficient, and also, by the way, ready for today's unstable environment as well, because the supply chain that is designed for unstable environment is what's going to win longer term as well. So that's what sort of gives a huge amount of difference of how do you really set up and build an industry that is geared up for a future growth opportunity.
Thanks so much for this. So I'm aware that you talked about if you lead country economics, you lead a club. So